I've talked a fair bit in interviews about this, so let's have a look at how the Cuban Boys made their first ever song 25 years ago, Cuban Boy. We had two things. We had an Atari ST and we had a copy of The World of Frank Chaxfield. Now the Atari ST had this sampler, a peripheral that plugged into the port on the side of the Atari and would record about 4 seconds of audio at something like 8 or 11 kilohertz. On the Frank Chaxfield album was a track called Cuban Boy, and it contained at the start this fantastic groovy loop which just about fitted into the memory of the sampler. I've heard other versions of this over the years, a lot more easy listening in style, but this version on The World of Frank Chaxfield for some reason had this fabulous groovy, should we say groove, about it, and it made it perfect to fit with the technology of the time. Also at the start of the track was a percussion loop, both running at roughly 113 beats a minute, fairly steady, not exactly, but with a sample that short it doesn't really matter. There's no real need to mess around with time stretching or anything. What I did was I put this percussion loop over a hip hop beat, over which went now you can already hear that's a hit record there, right there. So obviously I expanded that with various stupid FX noises, splashes, crashes, whooshes and zaps and stuff. A couple of samples from the 12-inch of Mental by the Manic MCs. And that would have been it had I not realised that this bit was probably more of a hook than the Latin loop was. So that got sampled and put in the track, except it didn't. It's a long segment and it doesn't necessarily run at a strict tempo. So the version that you hear in the opening titles to Still Game on BBC Two is this drum machine synced to an Atari ST, playing the percussion and the Latin loop, and me dropping this in live from a cassette player, 8 bars at a time. It wasn't that tricky. It took an hour or so to get it perfect, but it was the only way we could get the whole melody into the track.